Well, I love this idea of how do I take whatever actions are necessary to increase the probability as high as possible that I can get struck by lightning. And I want to talk more about what you did to ensure that your probability was as high as possible that you were going to make the transition first into editing high-level scripted television as you did for years. So let's go back to that point.
Sure. Well, it's funny because I do feel like my career has been really made up of a lot of turns. I've gotten lucky a bunch of times. You could say I created a lot of that, for sure. I do take pride in having lined them up. You can improve your chances of getting lucky, but you still have to get lucky. I say this all the time, like every one of us has had a fortunate timing break. There have been shows where I was hired on that I was dying to do, that I know for a fact that I was their 6th, 7th, 10th, 11th choice. But the proper confluence of events, like, this producer was late to this meeting, and so somebody else got to suggest me first, and they asked a bunch of other people to do it, and those people all said no, and I suppose you could sort of list it all out, right? But just as a catch-all, you're right. I would just be like, you need some fortune to smile on you. You can create some of that, but some things you need to get some breaks.
Well, I love this idea of how do I take whatever actions are necessary to increase the probability as high as possible that I can get struck by lightning. I love this. I'm going to turn this into a whole thing. I love this this image, this philosophy, and I want to talk more about what you did to ensure that your probability was as high as possible that you were going to make the transition first into editing high-level scripted television as you did for years. So let's go back to that point.
Sure. Well, it's funny because I do feel like my career has been really made up of a lot of turns. I've gotten lucky a bunch of times. You could say I created a lot of that, for sure. I do take pride in having lined them up, but you also, it's just a fact. Every single, Tom Cruise got lucky at some point. Chris Nolan got lucky. They all are very talented and they all work very hard, but some things just had out of their control, had to line up their way. And good for them. It's true for everybody, who's succeeding in some way. Look, some people are lucky because they have a super famous dad. You don't know. And then they get to do their first feature when they're 26, and good for them. Anyway, you talk about assistant editing also. I feel sometimes I look back and I'm I could have gone the assistant editor route. Maybe when I was 25, 26, I could have really been focusing on, I piled up enough editing days. I could have gotten into the union, which I, avoided until I was in my late 30s. I could have found an AE gig. I was working on reality documentary series with some editors who would be like, screw this. I'm going to take a step back. I got an in on one of these scripted shows, big shows, and got to assist for a year. And quickly the people they were working with were like, oh, you're an editor. You get it. Started to get opportunities, and then all of them broke into that pretty quickly. But, I've also seen people get mired in the assistant position for years. And one of the drawbacks of that, compared to the thing that I did, is that you don't get to be in the driver's seat, right? I was also getting a lot of training, very Karate Kid style, a lot of training on storytelling, on, editorial tricks, on getting better at doing my own sound. And you get a lot of notes about that kind of stuff. And the more notes you get about certain things, once you realize, if you're listening closely to what's happening to you, you realize you're getting a lot of the same notes from studios or producers or whatever. You're this is a thing I could get better at. I could get better at this sound effect treatment. I could get better at cutting these sort of things to tell a story. I could get better at, taking air out between lines, a lot of these kinds of things. And that's just experience you get only when you're in the driver's seat. It's such a weird singular job to be cutting, right? That as an assistant, you don't really get that training. The sort of on the job, under pressure, under fire training that you need to really get better at it. Then you're oh, now the battle is on, and it's, everything's real. There's actual deadlines, there's actual pressure, there's actual strangers you don't know watching your cut and giving you criticism of it, and you have to be prepared to not take that personally and just be great, how do we make this better?